Following her release from the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station in Malibu, California at nearly 1 a.m., Mitrice Richardson went missing for months, a circumstance the Sheriff's Department found of little concern. 10 months later, when park rangers discovered her partially mummified remains on the hillside of Dark Canyon, the Sheriff's Department went against the law and coroner's directions and airlifted the body to the station without doing any due diligence to document or preserve the scene and remains. Today, we discuss these events, what followed, and talk to a member of Mitrice's search and rescue team who had first-hand experience with LASD. You're listening to Creep It Real, and today we bring you part 2 of our coverage of the murder of Mitrice Richardson.
Creep It Real is a weekly podcast where we present our theories of the subjects we cover based on our interest and research. Some material may be graphic and disturbing, so proceed with caution.
Hey everybody, I'm just going to jump in here. So there were a couple things that I wanted to mention before we get... Oh, you're listening to Creep It Real. Hi.
Yeah, first of all.
I'm already in business mode. It's Ashley and Shy, and we're here to talk to you some more about Mitrice Richardson, and we're just kind of chomping at the bit, so...
Yeah, it's been a crazy morning.
Yeah, so let's just get into it. Oh, so on the last episode, I wanted to correct that I had said that Latrice had called the station at around 1 a.m., 12:38 a.m., so that she would have already been going back up there 4 hours later, but I was actually incorrect, and I would rather just correct myself, probably. I mean, maybe this isn't so silly to even correct, but either way, she called at around 10 p.m., otherwise she would have known that Mitrice was let out at 12:38 a.m. So, she called around 10 the first time p.m., Mitrice got let out at 12:38 a.m., and then she called back at 5:30 a.m. So, that was one thing. Also, the more I thought about it, I was thinking about Deputy Chu's email where he wrote his supervisors talking about how he had spoken to Deputy Lorero and how, after the fact, he didn't remember writing it and whatnot. But regardless, he wrote it, and he had said in that email that they were worried about her mental state at the restaurant, and so that's why they brought her in. But once they got to the station, they realized that she was intelligent and well-educated, so they didn't see any reason to keep her. And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, well, what does that have anything to do with her mental state at the time of this event? It has not... Well-educated, smart people have mental health issues. So I was just like, first of all, it's irrelevant, and it's also kind of offensive to think that that would preclude her from needing help for her mental state. So anyway, I just wanted to say that before we kind of moved on through the rest of the events that now we're going to discuss. So I have been ranting, so go forth.
Oh, you're fine. The inconsistencies in the Sheriff's Department stories regarding Mitrice's mental health that evening have been vast, and 911 was called by Joffrey's due to Mitrice's unusual behavior.
Yeah.
And then again, if you go back and look at our post, you can see just this insane transformation from Mitrice's normal state to what she looked like this day this happened. Mm-hmm. This unusual behavior was reported by the valet employees of the restaurant, the manager, the diner she joined for her meal, and even the deputies who arrived on scene at least at one point,
right?
Which is an important thing to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Without a psych evaluation, how did they even know she was well enough to be released, or did they simply just not care? Because once again, let's remember that they did conduct a field sobriety test, and they confirmed that she was sober and not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So then why would someone be acting like this?
Right.
So why did they take her in, removing her from her car, phone, and wallet, only to be released into the night without any of these things hours later? And when we say night, remember, it was legitimately 12:30 at midnight.
Yeah. And we have firsthand accounts that it's extremely dark in the area. So especially at night, in the middle of the night.
It's not a forgiving type of terrain either. Looking at the roads and whatnot, they're very switchbacky. It's desert. So, there's brush, there's animals, there's so many different things. Cars.
If there are cars driving.
Yeah. Well, and we were also informed that the people in this area they're very stick to themselves type people.
Yeah,
they're not...
It's kind of like a small town mentality, even though the area may be kind of spread out because it's larger properties.
Yeah. They go here to get away from other people and don't necessarily want people coming in on their area.
Yeah.
So the OIR, which stands for Office of Independent Review, is a group of private contractor attorneys that reports to the County Board of Supervisors. Michael Ginako,
Sure.
the head of the OIR, states, investigations of LASD are conducted by LASD's own Internal Affairs Department. The OIR's bread and butter work is to ensure that internal affairs investigations that are done are thorough investigations. But in the case of Mitrice Richardson, no internal affairs investigation was ordered because there really wasn't a complaint of any allegation of violation of policy.
I find that hard to believe, but okay.
Yeah. So instead of mandating a formal investigation, OIR called for a preliminary inquiry.
So on July 9th in 2010, 1 month before Mitrice's body was found, the OIR issued a confidential report to the Board of Supervisors. So this 58-page document was immediately leaked following the discovery of Mitrice's body. In it, the OIR declares Mitrice's questionable behavior, including going to the restaurant, ordering a meal, parking valet, and leaving without the means to pay, but it does not acknowledge the deputy's alleged remarks about Mitrice's odd statements that she was making. So rather, OIR determines that Lost Hills deputies didn't endanger Mitrice by releasing her and cites the sheriff's manual, which states that misdemeanor prisoners shall be released in the field whenever reasonably and safe to do so. I mean, if you're telling me it's reasonably safe to release a woman out into the night, or man, but woman out into the night at 1 a.m. without any forms of communication or any way to pay for anything, then...
Completely unfamiliar with the area.
Really? What constitutes, a actual... That's just BS, is what that is.
Yeah.
The report excludes 2 California penal codes about filing missing persons reports, one which states it is the duty of all law enforcement agencies to immediately assist any person who is attempting to make a report of a missing person, and another which states the local police or sheriff's department shall immediately take the report and make an assessment of reasonable steps to be taken to locate the person. The latter code also requires even more stringent measures when the missing person has no history of disappearing or are mentally unstable or both. So... that was Mitrice that night. So they blew off that that call that her mother made at 5:30 a.m. where she was trying to make a missing persons report, and that goes against California Penal Code. So I see lots of people talking about how the police did nothing wrong in this case and da-da-da. I'm like, that in itself is wrong if you don't take into account anything else that was done by them. So, stick it up your rear with that claim. I'm like, really? Okay, so...
I'm legitimately sipping tea over here, just
hold on. I'm gonna sip pretend tea. Okay. The OIR also claims that Baumgartner explained procedures for filing a missing persons report to Lettice whenever she called, though the audio release of that call contradicts that claim. When you listen to it, he's very dismissive of her from the get-go, really, after she tells him the circumstances, that no one's talked to her, and she was released into the night with nothing. And then he ends the call saying, call back in a few hours and maybe we can do something for you. So... what? I don't get it.
This is just someone being lazy at their job. This is someone not wanting to take the extra step to help this woman who is clearly in distress.
It's weird. The report also didn't mention Lieutenant Chu's email regarding Deputy Lorero saying Mitrice was acting unusual and was uneasy about letting her go. So it didn't mention that. Also didn't mention anything about the jail cell video being in Captain Martin's desk drawer for over 3 months while he denied its existence. So those are some pretty glaring pieces of information they left out of this report. And then in response to Mitrice's family's concerns about the video footage that they finally were allowed to see after all this time, the OIR report concludes that the deputy seen leaving the building after Mitrice couldn't have abducted her because he was on official business with his partner, and Mitrice was seen hours later in Montanito, yet that only accounts for a few minutes of the whereabouts of the deputy and his partner that day. He's on official business, so he couldn't have done anything wrong.
Yeah.
Which we already know contradicts the internal affairs investigation done by the sheriff's department into their own deputies, that they were doing illegal things on duty. So how you can just dismiss that because he's on duty, I don't know. But they did. So that's cool. Despite this man's statement that the OIR played a multifaceted role in the review of the department's actions, this claim was accompanied by a footnote that said OIR did not conduct any interviews of the deputies and station jailer who had actual contact with Mitrice Richardson on September 16th through September 17th who were involved in taking her into custody or released from custody. So basically, the sheriff's department got to just choose what they handed over to the investigators on this OIR investigation, or preliminary inquiry, rather. And the head of the OIR could not explain various omissions in the report, saying he did not personally conduct the inquiry or write the document, though he signed off on it. So, the biggest side-eye I could ever give somebody, that is the stupidest thing ever. I mean, I guess it's not the stupidest thing ever if you're trying to cover this whole... I think it's extremely frustrating to hear this, and I'm not related to Mitrice. She's not my daughter. I can only imagine how much agony you have to just be living in on a daily basis to have that be your answer to your daughter's death. And if the sheriff's department did anything wrong in this whole situation, that's your answer, is they're trying to tell you to take. So, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Well, and it's not just an accidental death, shut and close case or whatever. It's something really bad happened, and nobody wants to find answers. Nobody wants to give answers, but they know them. Yeah. Statistically speaking, when a missing woman is found dead, they are typically discovered within a 10-mile radius of where they were last seen. In one of the searches for Mitrice, searchers discovered a freshly painted mural along a culvert wall in Malibu Canyon, depicting nude black women in various graphic scenes stating "Land of the Afro" and "Afro Ho" with paint brushes left at the scene. And so we're going to bring it up again and play some audio from it, but weird coincidence, I used to work with a woman that I happen to speak to with today that had firsthand experience and eyes on this mural. Her and her mother were actually part of the search party and happened upon this mural and the culvert too as well. And she said that when they saw the mural, it was just really eerie and gave them really weird vibes. And they firmly believe that because of the nature of the mural, the black women obviously in the picture with the afro, they firmly believe that this has everything and anything to do with Mitrice. The mural itself is really creepy to look at too as well. Yeah. The paint that was used in the culvert, and I think Ashley had mentioned that not the whole culvert was painted. It was just what area, like the part where a body would have been dragged in. Yeah,
the bottom and around the outside, I guess. Talking to Colleen.
Yeah, it was like this gross peach color, and it happened to be the same color that my friend indicated was actually the background of the big old mural that was painted.
Oh, that's what y'all were saying when I came in. Okay.
Yeah. Oh. So, coincidence?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like an awfully bizarre coincidence, but it's possible, but I don't know. I'm not so sure.
And this mural too, I guess if you were just driving along the road, you wouldn't see it. Yeah. You actually have to go seek it out. Mm-hmm. So what would be the point of painting it if it's not accessible by the public just from driving by?
I don't know.
Even more interesting, although Los Angeles claims to be tough on graffiti and has a zero tolerance policy against it and the destruction of public property, investigators stated they found the perpetrators who told them they had no knowledge of Mitrice's case, and they determined the mural and its creators were unrelated to the case. So they just let these guys go and just painted over the mural the next day.
Right. Did we talk about what the Muriel? What it looked like?
So,
I mean, it was fairly offensive.
It is, and it's graphic, and it's weird. Honestly, because Colleen's an artist too. Uh-huh. So I asked her what she thought of it, and I was like, what do you think of the blue bodies? And she said, oh, well, that represents that, Mitrice is dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's one photo where one of the women has LA marked on her butt, and she's actually smoking what looks like a joint, and I guess Mitrice did smoke marijuana. Uh-huh. And I was asking her, okay, what about the women that are painted yellow? And, one is hula hooping. There's another one that looks like she's dancing. One of them is actually being birthed out of a very ginormous graphic vagina. Mm-hmm. And there's another blue one that's actually in a wheelchair, which, Mitrice was missing a leg when she was found. So who knows?
I don't know, man. Yeah.
The artist that did it said that they were trying to kind of replicate this specific artist style who, when you see their art and compare it, you're like, oh, maybe. But I mean, just looking and comparing the two, they really don't look anything alike. The other artist is just a bunch of kind of stick figures. Very bright, very colorful, almost happy looking, when this mural is so somber, creepy, ominous type stuff. And we'll get into the strange box looking face too as well.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because that was kind of strange. So anyway, we'll get more into that, but it was just really cool and interesting to speak with someone that had firsthand experience in this whole ordeal.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In late June 2010, an old schoolmate of Mitrice said he saw her in Las Vegas at a casino. When the story broke, Las Vegas PD received word of 70 more alleged sightings, and LA Sheriff's investigators traveled to Las Vegas for a joint agency press conference. Nothing tangible came from the sightings or press conference, and Lettice said those sightings were nonsense. Lettice felt that Mitrice was deceased pretty early on, and from past investigations, the mother's instinct is a strong one. On August 9th, 2010, at around 12:10 p.m., park rangers checking on an old pot farm they had raided a year prior discovered Mitrice's partially mummified remains on a hillside in Dark Canyon, 7 miles from the Lost Hill station and less than 2 miles from Bill Smith's home.
Right, so the last place she was seen, 2 miles, seems like maybe. Had you searched in a 2-mile radius of Bill Smith's home, which was the last place that you had seen or had reports of her being, that you might be able to find her, perhaps.
Because let's not forget, when a woman is found dead or missing, it's usually within a 10-mile radius of where she was last seen.
Yep.
So sheriff's deputies refused to say whether they searched Dark Canyon, even though it was within 2 miles of location they knew she was last seen. There's a bunch of theories as to why this could be the case here.
Yeah. And actually, from talking to Colleen, and also according to the evidence that we'll hear in a little while, just from the way they found her and things of that nature, she may not have actually been in this canyon the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's also possible that she was either, she was put here after she was dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm jumping the gun here.
Oh, it's okay. I was going to say, I was going to jump it too, but whatever.
Okay, that's fine. You can.
It's okay. So according to the coroner's report, an unidentified Lost Hills deputy arrived at the scene by 1:30, 80 minutes after the park rangers called in their find, which meant there was still 6+ hours of daylight, plenty of time for the coroner to get to Dark Canyon, take photos, collect evidence, and bring materials to the lab. So the state penal code dictates that law enforcement notify the coroner the moment it learns about human remains. But the coroner reported that LASD didn't alert them until 2:58. 90 minutes after deputy arrived and 3 hours after Lost Hills was informed of the body.
Quite a while.
Yeah.
Not exactly to the code that they're supposed to be working under.
You've been searching for this particular woman for how long now? I mean, if you've possibly found her, why would you not jump right on making sure it was her? It's just, it's so dumb.
Well, I think it's because it's almost like they were working under the assumption that it was her, everything around her was her, it was her, period, from the get-go, not even a question.
Yeah, but even still.
But yeah, I mean, according to the law, they are supposed to.
And you never assume anything, so.
No.
Unless you're us and you assume everything. Just before 5 p.m., the coroner's 5-man team, led by Assistant Chief Coroner Ed Winter, had been sent from the hillside above the canyon to Lost Hill Station, where they were told a helicopter would retrieve them. This is because it's pretty impossible to get to this area.
Yeah, it's a very rough terrain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. By 5:20, LASD detectives Dan McElderry and Kevin Acevedo had been airlifted to the site, but the coroner's team was left to continue waiting.
Huh.
Why?
Yeah, why? That doesn't make any sense, but okay.
Hello. Another hour and 40 minutes passed and still no helicopter had arrived for the coroner's team. They decided that they would have to return first thing the following morning to go and begin their process of photographing, cataloging, and collecting evidence.
So they thought.
At around 8 p.m., LASD got the helicopter and made a unilateral decision going against Assistant Chief Winter's directions and collected the remains of Mitrice Richardson and airlifted them back to the Lost Hills Sheriff Station, where this whole entire poop show started.
What the heck?
And their reason was such bullcrap. They were worried that the wildlife and animals would disturb the remains. That would have happened a long time ago.
Well, that's just...
It's not going to happen.
It's just so silly. It's just the silliest excuse I mean, it really does not make any sense. Okay.
No sense.
I mean, and that's not even the worst. It is the worst part, but it would. Okay, but let's continue on with the other details before because I mean, it gets even more outrageous after that.
So, doing this despite state code that says a body shall not be disturbed or moved from the position or place of death without permission of the coroner or coroner's appointed deputy, which they did not. They weren't aware, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That they were just going to airlift this body out of here.
No, they did not give permission in any way. No.
In all, sheriff's personnel kept the coroner's team on standby for nearly 4 hours and had exclusive access to the remains for 6.5 hours before removing them from the scene without approval.
I mean, so just like, okay, let's just say it. They didn't even photograph the body. It's somewhere in the upcoming, but they didn't even photograph the body. They didn't photograph any evidence on the scene. They didn't catalog anything. They didn't mark anything. They didn't do anything in order to help the coroner be able to assess the situation in any way whatsoever in the scene where it lay, because they just didn't document it at all. Like, what in the hell were they doing there nearly 7 hours if not assessing the situation and documenting it? That seems insanely bizarre to me. Luckily, the park rangers did take some photos, and they're the only ones that apparently did. So anyway, yeah.
And am I wrong for saying that from what I've learned and know over the years, just watching even like stupid crime shows on TV, the number one rule is you do not disturb the body.
Yeah.
You do not move it. You don't do anything until it's been photographed, tagged, and markers placed where things were found. It's just
if you were that worried about the body being disturbed by animals, then you would just have somebody overnight sit out with the body, cover it up, whatever measures you may need to take to protect it, even though you don't really care that much about the body's preservation, because if you were worried about the body's preservation, you would have not disturbed it, period. But also because then, as we see with their later actions, they don't even recover the whole body, and they don't give a flip about finding the rest of it later on. So, whatever. That's just such a poor excuse for completely destroying an entire crime scene, either because you don't want anybody to be able to assess the situation too deeply, or because you think that this person is not worth the effort it takes to do everything correctly. What is your motive here? Because I refuse at this point in this story to believe that there isn't a motive the way that this crime scene is handled. So, yeah, anyway.
I mean, we thought the Kendrick Johnson mishandling of the crime scene was bad, but at least they took photos.
Yeah, I mean, that's just not even, it's not even in the same, this is not even the same universe as this. Like, I could not believe what I was reading whenever I read about this, whenever I've talked to people, whenever I have watched things. It's insane the amount of negligence that went on for whatever reason it did.
Yeah, sipping our tea.
Yeah. Okay, so a 40-year LAPD veteran detective is quoted as saying, "Law enforcement's job is to protect the crime scene. You never move a body without permission. The events of August 9th sound ass backwards." Obviously. I'm including some quotes from various experts because it's not just Shy and I who are saying that this crime scene was mishandled greatly. It's the law, and it's also these other experts that have experience with these things. So here's Clea Koff. She's a former UN forensic anthropologist and former member of the FBI Scientific Working Group. She now runs the LA-based nonprofit Missing Persons Identification Resources Center, and she has worked with the family after the discovery of Mitrice's body because somebody needed to be an advocate for them in the situation since it was handled so negligently. So she is quoted as saying, even if the coroner's office was going to give permission for someone else to do recovery, they would only do it after an assessment by photo or a visit by personnel or a detailed description, all of which LASD could have accommodated over the course of nearly 7 hours. The sheriff's personnel apparently did not photo document the scene or individual stages of recovery and didn't collect soil samples. The coroner had no understanding of the body in relationship to the place it was found, only had a body that was brought to them. Here's just another expert saying that they didn't care to do anything to allow the coroner to make any sort of determination about how this woman got to this place, what happened to her before she was in this canyon. They just didn't help the coroner in any way. It seems that it's almost like they just didn't want the coroner to be able to determine anything about the body. Yeah. At least they had the park rangers' pictures, though they were just trying to photograph exactly what they had found. They are not a crime scene photographer whatever. They don't have that kind of experience. So they haven't been released to the public in any way whatsoever, but I'm sure they're not quite as detailed as a coroner might hope to have pictures if they're not able to access a crime scene at all. But anyway, so in these photos that the park rangers took, her clothes had been removed, and the only articles of her clothing that were found in the area were her belt, her jeans, and her bra. And her belt had been taken out of the loops of her jeans and was lying 100 yards away. So just keep that in mind, that taking a belt out of the loops and pants isn't exactly the most effortless, easy thing to do in the world. If you were an animal or water, as we'll see in a little while, that they're trying to blame
a flood.
Yeah, blame the situation on animals or water. So, the animals that are able to unclasp your bra and the water that takes your belt out of its belt loops. Clea Koff, the forensic anthropologist, she said that there were 0 signs of animal degradation on the body or clothes, and that with a good washing, the jeans and bra could be worn again. So she didn't think from that evidence that the body had been in that place, in that position for very long. Otherwise, the clothing would have been deteriorated. Mitrice's right leg was caked in soil and sprouting weeds. It sat 2 yards uphill from the body on top of a mound of dry vines. So it was completely separated from the body. The femur of the leg had been removed from the soft tissue as if pulled from the top of the thigh. There was nothing but a narrow duct where the bone had been, and the leg bore no signs of having been ravaged by animals, which would normally drag something that size downhill, not up in the first place. So, because you think, okay, well, the leg was pulled off of the body, maybe an animal did it, but like she said, there were no marks on the leg that made it look like an animal had tried to drag it, and there would be marks with its teeth, but they would also probably drag it from a smaller point like the foot or the ankle as well, and they wouldn't go uphill with something that heavy. So doesn't really sound too likely that an animal did that.
I was just thinking, if this canyon is so hard to get down into, I don't even know if animals would go down there just to go down there. I mean,
they would go down there for probably
hungry
food.
enough. Yeah, but I mean, just having the experience, with hunting and whatnot, an animal doesn't want to have to work that hard for a kill.
Yeah, and they really didn't get anything out of it.
No.
In this situation anyway, so there's no signs of that in the first place.
Right.
So it's people not taking any evidence into account and making determinations. I mean, the sheriff's department, it's like they're making determinations based off not all the information, just partial information. It's very strange. So there was an owner of a horse property that was about a third of a mile away from the location where Mitrice's remains were found, and he's quoted as saying, "We buried sheep here a while back. Coyotes and vultures dug it up and picked it clean within days, and if they missed anything, the bugs and rodents finished it off." So her body not having been ravaged by animals is slightly questionable as far as how long her body was actually in this location.
Yep.
And talking to Colleen earlier, I kind of was like, oh, I think I just heard how she got here.
Makes sense.
So it definitely makes sense, and it makes sense based off of how things looked when the park rangers initially found the remains. So, but we're going to talk about that closer to the end of this episode. So,
because let's not forget too, her arm was like the only part that had been fully mummified.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So I don't know how that happened.
So strange. Proper protocol when human remains are discovered is to completely leave the remains as they are, not to touch anything, contact the coroner and wait for them to arrive so that the remains can be photographed, the site inspected for clues, and a crime scene can be established. I just want to emphasize this, okay? This is just what it's supposed to be. That's why I'm repeating myself. So instead, the deputies that arrived on the scene went against explicit orders from the coroner, bagged Mitrice's remains, and airlifted them out of the canyon by helicopter before the coroner could even see the crime scene. The coroner found this an inexplicable decision, insisting he was very clear with the sheriff's officials and could not think of another case in which a police agency had moved entire skeletal remains without the coroner's approval. So, Ed Winter, the LA County Assistant Chief Coroner, stated, "The Sheriff's Department moved her remains without our permission. I don't think we'll ever know what happened to her unless someone comes forward with additional information." Thanks, Sheriff's Department. We have you to thank for all that. Obviously, due to the ridiculously inexplicable removal of her remains from the canyon, the coroner was not able to determine how she died, when she died, where she came from, what was going on.
Which is like such crap, because it's so crazy what people can discover with a body and with its remains.
Right.
What happened, where it happened, and when. So honestly, I think if the coroner had gotten this evidence, we would know exactly what had happened and it wouldn't be this big of a mystery. So
there would be a lot more answers, that's for sure. I mean, obviously, it's really ridiculous. Just think about this being the person that you love most in the world, and that's how they have handled this situation. And tell me that you're not thinking, I'm going to burn the place down, because that's how I feel. I'm not going to do that, but you know.
I don't get how her mom has not.
I know, I really don't.
Yeah. Kudos to her mom and family for just being the most composed people, man.
Yeah, it's amazing. And they can sit side by side with these sheriff's deputies and not be like throttling them. I don't know how she does it. I really don't.
No, and like when you watch the interview, even when her aunt is speaking to I think it's the sheriff, she's just so, she's not screaming at him. She's not belligerent. And here, I mean, I would probably burn the city down. I'd be like, hey,
I know.
Finding out.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So a deputy at the time countered that investigators removed the body because they were worried about impending nightfall and that animals would disturb the remains, which is obviously something that they weren't too concerned with in the months leading up to the discovery, and because they were barely doing any searches for her.
Yeah.
They did 2, and one was 6 months after the first one. That wasn't that thorough to begin with, might we just add. But then they don't really care after this discovery of her remains, and they airlift the bulk of them out. We'll hear later, they'll leave some behind, and they don't really care to collect them. So it's kind of strange that they're so concerned with the remains that day, and that's the only day they're ever concerned with them. It doesn't really mesh well to me with what is actually going on here. There's something strange about that decision, in my opinion. And I think probably a lot of people would agree with me on that. That's not normal to be just all of a sudden one day like, oh my gosh. Like instead of doing anything else to preserve the scene, they think, oh, we'll just bag it up and take it out, So anyway, let's continue to get more into this.
Okay, we're going to get deeper into this. So a deputy stated that they received permission from a coroner staffer, not coroner or assistant coroner, as dictated by California Penal Code, to lift the skull to see what was beneath the leaf and dirt debris that her entire skeletal remains lifted with it.
Oh.
This contradicts the photographs taken by the park rangers upon the discovery of the remains, which show the skull fully separated from the body, lying upside down with her lower jaw resting on the chest. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? Did someone move the remains? And like, what is...
I mean, okay, so... I don't really know what I thought, how it ended up that way until she said she thought somebody dumped her over the edge of the canyon. And then today, which I don't know if I should put that in there right now or not, but I'll just say it. Like Colleen said that when they were walking on, and I forget the street it is, but we'll listen to it.
Yeah, we'll listen to it.
That it it kind of overlooks Dark Canyon, so that if you went on the certain part, I guess you could dump a body over the edge very easily. And in my opinion, I was like, oh, that kind of started to make some sense as to, I mean, it sounds like I'm like, oh, like that was a good discovery, but it starts to make sense how perhaps her leg could have been separated from the rest of her body in such a clean way. Maybe they were holding her by that leg or something, and it kind of it's what fell first whenever they dumped it over the side. But anyway, so her body rolls down to the canyon spot because it's kind of on a little hill. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's just where it rested, and she was missing a few neck bones, and her hyoid bone was gone. And if you're missing some neck bones and 5 vertebrae, if she was missing some of these, perhaps in that tumble down the side of the canyon, her head came off of her body.
Yeah.
They maybe hung onto her leg for a second longer. As we'll talk about, her clothes are kind of found scattered about 100 yards away. I think her belt was found little distances away, or the remainders of her clothes were found, and maybe they just kind of threw them out as they walked or drove or something. That might make sense because the clothes were scattered in a way that would have been against the current if there was a flood of any sort or any significant water in the canyon. So that doesn't really make sense as to how it got there. So maybe someone threw it out. And the whole perhaps someone dumped her over the side of this canyon makes sense to me with how it was found.
I think it does, Especially if you think about if the body had already been previously decomposing and in a very fragile state.
Yeah, because also
rolling it down this insane canyon full of vines and blah, 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 it would probably, a body part may end up coming off.
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted to reiterate that because it makes the most sense after like we had the aha moment.
Yeah.
The weird, and we'll get into like the weird shallow grave and then the culvert being painted and how a cadaver dog actually hit on that culvert when it had been brought in.
Right.
So Ashley had mentioned that she had been missing 5 neck bones, including her hyoid bone, which can determine death by strangulation or slit throat.
Right.
So convenient that it's missing.
Yeah.
That would have been huge. That said, the park ranger's photographs were the only ones taken of this crime scene, as the LASD took no pictures before airlifting the remains to the station.
Right.
And I don't know how much authority park rangers have at this point, or at any point really, but I don't think their pictures would suffice.
Right. Well, I'm glad they were taken because they're the only ones that were ever taken. They were probably just, it wasn't probably the most informative thing in the world.
Yeah. So Lieutenant Rawson, who supervised investigators on LASD's behalf, met with Mitrice Richardson and others to discuss the case on 10/10, 2 months after the discovery of Mitrice's remains and airlift. LASD won't say if Lieutenant Rawson or Smith were on the scene in Dark Canyon to witness the airlift. Why not?
I don't know. Because they weren't. And so they're in charge of investigating it, but they weren't there and they have no idea what is true or being told to them is true. So just keep people who don't know anything in the mix and you'll get away with it because they won't know when you're lying. Anyway, I'm like going on some sort of like downward spiral.
He posited that Mitrice died from anaphylactic shock from poison oak, something so rare there it is not any reliable statistic. Or she wandered into the canyon and became one of 2 people who die a year from rattlesnake bites.
Well, let's just say that no one is just simply wandering into that canyon. That's just
no.
How, if you're going in there, you're going in there for a trek of your life. You have to have certain gear on. It's not just some, la-di-da.
Well, and Mitrice she stated a couple times that Mitrice was not a nature girl. She hated bugs. Yeah. She didn't like being outdoors. She wasn't one to just go hike in the woods, whether or not she was in a sound state of mind.
Yeah.
So, just ridiculous. On Mitrice's nakedness, Rawson states animals removed her clothing, of which only her jeans, belt, and bra were recovered. This would mean scavengers took off Mitrice's sneakers, socks, unbuckled belt, slipped it out of the loops, unzipped and pulled off her jeans, then removed her underwear and unfastened 2 hooks on her bra.
Yeah, skillful. I mean, I don't know. Maybe a raccoon could do it.
My husband can't even unhook my bra most of the time, so I highly doubt animals are.
I'm telling you, those raccoons are stealthy with those they have those little hands that really.
Those little hands.
They really get around.
But regardless.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Not what happened.
No,
it's okay.
Raccoons did not take off Mitrice's belt or bra. No.
This to me tells me that she was messed with before and didn't care to clothe her afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to put this part in here, but I do think she was raped. I think 100% she was raped. And then probably killed afterwards.
Yeah.
And they didn't care to clothe her again.
Right.
Even though removing of the socks and sneakers is strange to me, but.
Well, there's always, they didn't want evidence on the stuff. I don't know.
Forensic anthropologist Koff stated, it's absurd to suggest this was the work of animals and that besides some rust on the zipper and buckle, the clothes showed no sign of damage, whether by animal or nature. It could have been worn again after being washed. May not have been exposed to the elements for 11 months.
Yeah.
So
probably weren't, just as an example, down the road months and months ago, it was about 8 months ago, someone had left this yellow shirt on the side of the road. I see it every day when I go on walks and it rains and it storms sometimes. There was even snow one day. Anyway, it's been out there and I'm not touching it. I don't know what that shirt was there for to begin with. Who knows what was on there to make it get thrown on the side of the road. So either way, you could not today go out there, pick that shirt up and wash it and wear it again. And it's been about 9, I think at this point it's like about 9 months. So, and that's on the side of a road. That's not in like the middle of this canyon where it's just wild.
Supposed floods,
Yeah. So So, no. So, no. I just really don't think that body was there for 11 months. No way.
Nope. On 10 of 10, Captain Smith stated that if animals did not remove Mitrice's clothing, rushing water was responsible. Again, dumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, the only time I've had clothes ripped off by water, I was boating and I fell off the tube and kept holding on. But that was
like when you know, that's a different, I had my top pulled off multiple times going down a water slide.
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing. Also, it doesn't matter because logic dictates that it would go with the current, not against the current, which is where her stuff was found. So, these are literally the suggestions of a little child. Like a 7-year-old child, as his daughter was like, well, what if this happened? And he was like, yeah, by the way, this is what we think has happened. Rushing water. It's like, no, dude, I don't think so. Let's have some experts talk on the matter and not your dumbass saying some crazy business. Okay, so here we go.
So also we need to think, did water unbuckle her belt, unzip her jeans, and again, unclasp her bra? Likely not. In 11 months in California elements, why was the body mummified versus fully decomposed?
Yeah. And, it's only partially mummified, but still, natural mummification is usually the result of immediate and prolonged post-mortem exposure to sub-freezing or extremely dry environments, such as an attic or closet. This is also better achieved when the body is clothed, providing a barrier against flies that lay eggs that hatch flesh-eating maggots. It wouldn't be impossible for the body to mummify in the elements, but this state of decomposition is not normal, especially in Malibu between 2009 and 2010, an El Nino season with almost zero sub-freezing weather. Never mind all the creatures in the area that feed off of the dead. So also I read that, or I think I heard her say, the anthropologist, that animals don't like to feed off of a mummified body. So that possibly could explain it being out there for a little while. But I guess if her leg wasn't mummified.
But as I was stating, if this canyon was so treacherous to get down and whatnot, I don't even know if an animal would bother getting down there. Sans maybe like some vultures that could easily fly in and out.
Yeah.
I just don't think it was out there long enough for anything to take interest in it.
Yeah, I really agree. The naked body of a woman was in a vulnerable state was found within 2 miles of where she was last seen in an area she had no expertise in an unexplained position. The default position on this would be that it is a homicide, at least until you can rule it out. And that is what the forensic anthropologist stated about the situation. No one has explained why the mummified left arm was tightly flexed with her hand on her heart, which could not have been the result of environmental conditions where the body was found, because there was nothing present to hold her arm that way as she was nude, and defying gravity also. So to cough, this indicated that the limb was held in place by a sheet or other sort of wrapping in a different environment while mummification set in, and then she was moved to this place, which I agree with the forensic anthropologist on her determination based off of what she's seen. Maybe not on the guy who listened to his 7-year-old give him ideas the night before. So a 30-year-old LAPD detective veteran said, on the face of it, she was killed. It sounds like someone abducted her, killed her, and at some point dumped her body. There's another one for you. In a press conference immediately following the discovery of the body, bringing back old Sheriff Moonbeam here to give you a quote, immediately following the discovery of Mitrice's body in a press conference, he says, "We have no indication that this was a homicide at this point. I don't believe that the remains are capable of telling us a story." I'm like, geez Louise, from the get-go, they were ready to tell you that they couldn't determine anything based off of the remains. That seems like, let's chill, dude. I thought you were chill, Sheriff Moonbeam. like, what's happened? The whole thing makes me so furious. Okay, to rule a cause of death out, you first have to rule everything in, but LASD seemed determined to deny Mitrice's death was a result of a crime. Like I just said, they were really like, this is just some sort of strange occurrence. Steve Whitmore, the department spokesperson who I can't stand, declined several opportunities to make the officers who had been there, Detective McElderry and Acevedo, among others, available for comment. So anybody who actually had been in the situation when the body was recovered, none of them were allowed to give any statements, talk at all. Okay? Probably because they were trying to keep them from incriminating themselves or the department.
Yeah.
So when the journalist for the LA Magazine article that I talked about last episode, that was Mike Kessler, he emailed a sheriff's reservist who was said to be in Dark Canyon on the day that Mitrice's remains were found. He instead received a reply from the Lost Hills captain, Stephen. It said, "Please refrain from contacting the staff. The harassing nature of your attempted contact with my staff is becoming very troublesome, and again must cease immediately. We will not and cannot discuss this case with you. So that afternoon, he received a call from that little devil Whitmore, who said the sheriff's department has nothing to hide. Yet he also finished with, when you contact them, they get unnerved. And I have to say, if you're not doing anything wrong, why in the hell are you getting unnerved whenever a journalist is calling you to get statements from you about a case that you should be able to answer questions about? Let's talk about what else they neglected to do in this situation. Mitrice's autopsy or collecting evidence, whatnot. The hair on Mitrice's head was not examined to see if it matched hairs that were found scattered on the ground around her, which I bet you they were related to her or something.
Had to have been.
But you know, I doubt there's a lot of people just flicking their hair around on this canyon side. But metallic fragments and an earring in the detached hair, which were found near Mitrice, which she was not wearing at the time of her arrest, were not sent to the crime lab. Okay, so this could either be something that she got after the arrest, or is this somebody else's stuff that she has scattered around her body? What is that? Bug egg casings that were on the body weren't tested to determine when flies had hatched or if they were consistent with the environment, which would help determine time of death and location of death. The dirt and the leaves around and under the body were not tested for blood. Her pubic hair was not combed for suspect hairs or foreign fibers or tested for semen. No craniotomy was performed to see if there was any...
Like blunt force trauma?
Yeah, trauma. Articles of clothing found near the scene of her remains were also not tested, and honestly, for several weeks, the dang coroner didn't even know that clothes were found on the scene at all, because the forensic anthropologist that we've been talking about, Clea Koff, found the clothes wadded up in Mitrice's body bag after viewing her body. In the hell kind of stuff is this? They didn't even care. It's so weird.
They didn't. They just wanted to bag it and then get rid of it and not have to deal with it ever again, it seems like.
Yeah.
Because clothing is sent to another lab to be inspected, and it was just wadded up and put in
her body
what
bag.
The heck? There's inconsiderate, and then there's this.
Yeah.
Which is on a whole new level.
It is. Yeah, and it doesn't seem so innocent. When you put it all together, it just is like, huh? It seems like there's something fishy going on. Mitrice's teeth appeared to be pink, which is a sign of possible strangulation, but the coroner had still not received her hyoid bone, which is the neck bone that can determine if someone has been strangled or if their throat has been slashed, and there has not been another search conducted after the second search, which was 6 months after the discovery of Mitrice's remains, to see if they can find any further bones. Thinking along the lines of her being dumped over the side of this canyon, it could be within a decent distance around her body. You know, obviously some of the bones and some of her stuff was found at some decent distance. So it's possible they could still find these bones that are missing. Obviously, it's not going to be the most easy thing to do in the world now that it's 8 years ago, but they could have found some of these bones around the area where her body was found if they had actually cared to look for them. May have helped them a little bit, or there might be other pieces of evidence. Who knows? You know, it's just they don't really care. So out there somewhere is possibly some of her neck bones or something.
Yeah, I just think it's super convenient that was like a key piece bone missing. So
yeah. Definitely. Like I said, for an agency that was supposedly so concerned with animals getting to the remains, the reasons why they claim that they airlifted the remains before the coroner could get there, they just don't seem that concerned with the rest of the remains that were yet to be found. And all this being said, all of the stuff that we just said, the Office of the Independent Review cleared the LSD. I feel like I'm on LSD when I'm reading about this case. The OIR cleared the LASD of any wrongdoing and how it handled the discovery of Mitrice's remains. Conveniently enough, Bob Olmsted, a former LASD commander who was recently branded one of the most important whistleblowers in the history of Los Angeles, says that the OIR's integrity is compromised by its proximity to LASD's most powerful figures. So basically, who cares what they've determined, because they're corrupt, I guess, is what he's saying.
Yeah, which is scary stuff when you think about it, because the job of the police, is to serve and protect us. And these people are clearly abusing their authority and position of power for really sinister.
Basically, they're a city of Cartmans just on the loose.
Yeah. Respect my authority. The head of the ICIB, International Criminal Investigations Bureau, at the time of Mitrice's disappearance, Captain Tom Carey, was a Tanaka loyalist who faced obstruction of justice charges a few years ago. It said that Tanaka instructed deputies to work in gray areas.
That sounds awfully accurate.
The LASD spokesperson stated multiple times that no one could simply walk to it in regard to the site where the remains were found. Interesting, considering Mitrice was in jeans and sneakers and was in no way an outdoorsy kind of person, yet she supposedly traversed this rugged, rocky terrain in the dark.
Which is what they're, trying to claim.
Yeah, doubt it. On 12/9 of 2010, Latisse sat down with Sheriff Baca to submit a request to have Mitrice's remains exhumed and re-examined by the FBI. He agreed, and he said he had already called the FBI, stating, "I am totally disappointed in the coroner's lack of sensitivity about the evidence. The removal of trousers and even her undergarments and belt are not acts of nature. I've always felt that it should have been treated from the offset as a possible homicide. When you say it's not a murder, you better know what you're talking about, and I don't think we've been able to conclude that."
Oh my gosh, what are you talking about, man? You're the one that said it.
Yeah, like, what reality do y'all live in here?
Seriously.
Okay. He even said he'd post a reward on LACountyMurders.com, the county's official website for wanted announcements. But over 7 months later, nothing was posted to the website, and the FBI's point person in LA told Baca soon after that meeting that they'd be unable to help. So the FBI is pretty much just like, sorry, can't do anything for you?
Yeah. Pretty much.
Okay. When Mike Kessler called the FBI to ask why they changed their mind, the spokesperson Laura M. Miller explained it never agreed to do the exam as Baca had stated in the meeting with Latrice.
Huh.
Yeah. On July 13th, 2011, after 6 months of pressuring coroner's office, Mitrice's body was finally exhumed. The exam was unfortunately to be done by the LASD crime lab.
Yeah. We would really like an independent review or an independent autopsy, and it not being done by the sheriff's department's own crime lab just seems like that does little to nothing here.
It is unfortunate because, if the people who are hiding the crime investigating the crime, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes no sense to have them do it.
No. And so I don't know if this was a matter of Baca having Alzheimer's or if he was just a corrupt piece of poo, but something here doesn't line up. He's all of a sudden, well, first of all, he's just trying to butter her buns. He's like, oh, I never thought it was a right to not call it a homicide, even though the day that we discovered her remains, I, using my own mouth, said in a press conference that it wasn't a homicide.
Yeah.
I don't understand. But anyway, what was that? Was he just lying? It's so weird. All of these people in the sheriff's department seem like they're totally okay with saying one thing and changing it completely and lying about it to multiple different people. Like, they have no qualms about lying to whoever they need to lie to in order to do whatever they want to do. It's freaking crazy.
It truly is. And 5 months following the discovery of Mitrice's remains, her mother, Rhonda Hampton, a friend, and some park rangers leading the way made the trek in full gear, helmets, ropes, etc., to the spot where Mitrice's remains were discovered to put up a memorial. While they were there, Mitrice's mother discovered one of Mitrice's finger bones, proving yet again that the LASD did not thoroughly search the area where her body was found.
Right?
That had to have been so traumatic. A slap to the face too as well.
Right. That's what's really, it's like, oh, so I'm here putting up a memorial and I found a bone and you guys are trying to tell me that you are doing a thorough search? I don't think so, man.
I'm not even, we're not there with investigators and professionals who do this for a living. We're there to put up a memorial and discover things that you supposedly missed. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't think you care to find it.
In the summer of 2011, 1 year after Mitrice's remains were discovered, the LASD settled with Mitrice's parents for $900,000, though Michael Richardson continued to seek a criminal investigation into her death. This isn't about money. I want a trial. The sheriff's department denies any wrongdoing, though rather than use county counsel, the department had hired an upmarket Glendale law firm to represent them.
They upgraded their lawyers.
Yeah, which isn't cheap.
Yeah.
The LASD also implemented new procedures for releasing arrestees from jail. They now have the option to wait at the station until morning. Why wasn't this just an all-time thing? Ugh.
That in itself kind of contradicts what they said, that they were like, oh, you can stay here till morning.
Yeah.
And then they said later they didn't say that, but, you know, they had initially said, but we told her she could stay here until morning. And then now they're saying, well, we've created a new procedure. Which way is it, man?
Yeah.
Like, God.
8 years after Mitrice's remains were found, questions continue regarding her case, and cause of death is still undetermined. If her case were to be deemed a homicide, it would be added to the 4,862 unsolved murders in LA County between 2000 and 2010, which is like,
it's a lot.
Mind-blowing, honestly.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
And you know what's so crazy is I have seen so many times, and I think I say this kind of thing on every episode, but it's interesting to see what people think about these cases. So, and I see all these people talking about how there's no murders in this area, how it's so unlikely that she was actually murdered. It's so much more likely that it was an accident. And obviously in her mental state, she just killed herself or da-da-da. And here we have, you're sitting here telling us that there was almost 5,000 murders between 2000 and 2010 in the LA County. And then the actual station and area where she was taken has their own amount. So
yeah, of those, 7 homicide cases remain unsolved by the Malibu Lost Hills station.
And that's unsolved. That's not just committed there. So there's my answer to that argument.
At this time, although under new leadership, Sheriff's Department spokesperson states that all leads have been exhausted, but also that the case is open and any new leads will be pursued when they are received by the Sheriff's Department. It is a death investigation at this time, as the coroner's office has not ruled it as a homicide.
Which, how convenient for you.
Always.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the mural now.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the more I think about it, and if you really do look at it, it's so weird, and it really bugs me, and it's just so convenient, I guess. I use that word a lot, but it's just such, if it's a coincidence, it's the strangest coincidence, but yeah. I don't think it is at this point. So the department has declined to answer any questions about the mural or about the reassignment of the Malibu Lost Hills sheriff's captain who oversaw deputies at the station at the time of Mitrice's disappearance.
So as with their typical procedure, it's like, it's just don't say anything. Just don't talk.
Exactly.
You know, lie and deny and don't talk.
Yep. Montanito residents are still uneasy about the incident and don't know why it hasn't been attempted to be solved. In February of 2017, a California attorney general failed to uncover evidence that would merit criminal charges against the LA County sheriff's deputies for the handling of Mitrice's disappearance. In a letter to Michael Richardson, they state, there is insufficient evidence to support a criminal prosecution for destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence.
How in the hell is that true? How do you say that?
It's insulting to anyone and everyone that's trying to get this case solved and who actually gave a crap, you know?
Yeah, I just don't know how you can even make that claim when you're telling me you airlifted the remains out of the canyon without doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
How is that not in itself destruction of evidence?
Hello. Wadding up and stuffing her clothing in the body bag. Like, yeah. Come on. The statute of limitations for concealment or tampering of evidence passed years ago.
Yeah, so basically, can't really do anything about it.
Nope. At this point,
I'm going to have some lawyer tell me why the statute of limitations is something that we have
for
here
this
today.
Type of, yeah, like this, I mean.
Yeah, violent crimes, you know,
death.
How you can be like, well, 6 years has passed, so, you know, you're okay on that concealment of this murder. It's so weird.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
The Lost Hills phone station phone log showed that Mitrice called her grandma 4 times, but AT&T records do not show these calls.
Yeah.
Again, weird coincidence that the only phone that recorded calls that night was supposedly broken.
Right.
Senior Assistant Attorney General Lance Winters stated, although calls could have been made, those calls were either not picked up or were not made at all.
Yeah, the Attorney General says it. Come on.
Yeah, and there was speculation that Mitrice wasn't even talking to anyone. She was just speaking to a dial tone.
Yeah.
But we can't be sure.
No, nobody
obviously.
can. Yeah.
They did conclude that the remains were removed before the coroner arrived, but that it was highly disputed whether the coroner gave permission, which directly contrasts the coroner's and assistant coroner's repeated statements on the matter.
Yeah.
They were like, no, we never gave permission.
Right.
David Faulkner, a forensic anthropologist and entomologist that manages the entomology department at San Diego and Natural History Museum since 1974 and has trained officers from LAPD and LASD in crime scene preservation, is also an instructor at UC Riverside teaching forensic entomology, and Mike Kessler was referred to him by LA County Coroner's Office in regard to Mitrice's autopsy. He stated that he wasn't the entomologist on the case, but when he was told that the rare beetles that were found on the body were discarded at the time of the autopsy, he expressed outrage, stating, if insects were not standard arthropods attracted to a decaying corpse, they could have played a part in the body decomp that scientists are unaware of. At the very least, keep them like DNA samples until we have technology to extract a person's genetic makeup from the samples. Not much value was placed on her life. She was not important. She was seen as worthless, and we will never know if she was murdered. Her remains should have been left alone until she could have been properly removed without contamination to her skeletal remains or area she was found.
So that's coming from the
guy
who trained the LASD on how to handle a crime scene. So it's not like they've been instructed on how to handle a crime scene. They willfully chose to not follow what they were taught, for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he's outraged by it and pretty much like, you idiots. Right. So,
and he could have been used on her case. He could have been airlifted to the scene and given his expert opinion on the situation. But instead, the sheriff's department decided to airlift her remains out after nobody saw it. So, cool.
And I don't think people realize and understand how important bugs are to a crime scene like this. They're a huge part and can really help solve crimes. We've all seen Silence of the Lambs, so if it's not a poop reference, it's going to be
a movie reference. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking we hadn't said a poop reference in a while.
I know. How do I fit poop in here? But anyway.
We did it.
We did it. Anthropologists are well trained on bones and have good handle on decoding crime scenes. So forensic entomologists understand bones of insects, but neither were present at the scene of the discovery of Mitrice's remains. Experienced hiker Steve Fuji says of Dark Canyon, overgrown. If it's dark, it is scary and arduous, especially for an inexperienced hiker.
Right. And their tennis shoes, just kind of, jeans and tennis shoes.
Not happening. From the autopsy, because multiple cases of death could not be ruled out, both cause and manner of death still remain undetermined.
So that's really unsatisfactory, and I guess is what I would say, in my opinion. You really don't have any answers, and unfortunately,
we don't have all the answers, but we have
true. That's true.
Some.
Yeah, but it's just you can't have an official cause of death, but also perhaps how much evidence was destroyed in either the collecting of her remains or the transporting or autopsy. It was just. So there was negligence at every turn that perhaps any sort of little clue could have been derived from some of this evidence that was just totally destroyed or neglected or whatever.
Anything would have really helped in this instance, but there was never a chance given for it to.
Yeah.
Thanks to
the sheriff's department. So I think here is going to be a good place for us to play our call that we had earlier this morning with Shai's ex-coworker, Colleen.
Yeah.
And who we talked about earlier, she and her mother were part of the search and rescue crew.
And also, and her mom was also a volunteer sheriff.
Yeah, that's also she was a volunteer for the LASD. So
and trained search and rescue.
Yeah, so she had some interesting information that she shared with us, and so we're gonna just play part of that call for you right now, and we'll come back and talk about it.
So she just told me about the covert that was found. That was peach color. So when they found the mural, that background color was the same exact peach paint color
as the. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Wait, it was the same peach color as what?
So
when we, basically the day before the search party that we were a part of, my mom had taken me to the neighborhood where she was last seen, which is Montanito.
Yes.
And yeah, so my mom, she has a background in search and rescue. Like, she was a volunteer LA County Sheriff for a while, and she would participate in search and rescues on horseback.
Okay.
And so she has experience with the search and rescue. So this one, she saw it on the news, and we were hanging out that weekend, and she's like, do you want to come with me? We're just going to go hike around this neighborhood and try to see if we can find anything. And so the day before, she just took me out to go see the neighborhood because we didn't live that far away from it.
Okay.
And Montanito is like a very secluded area in the Malibu hills.
Yeah.
There's really nice houses out there, but where Montanito is, it's kind of smaller California ranch style houses. There's a lot of trees. I was telling Shai that at nighttime it's extremely dark.
Yeah.
Like, even with the very few street lights, it's very, very dark at night. So when we drove out there, it was kind of like a late afternoon, and we were just kind of driving around the neighborhood, and she showed us the culvert where supposedly a body was stuffed into it.
Oh, I do remember that now. Okay. I'm sorry. I just was like, oh yeah, okay.
She was telling me they brought out dogs to sniff out the culvert, and they hit on the culvert. And then right below the culvert is this woman's property, and she kind of has like makeshift horse corrals built on the property, and in one of the corrals you could see from the road that it looked like a shallow grave.
Okay.
Like, I saw it with my own two eyes. Like, it definitely looked like the ground was disturbed right there, just in this random spot in the middle of a horse corral, like the size of a body.
Okay.
And it's like, could that not be a shallow grave?
Yeah.
And so right above this woman's property was the culvert. And so when we were doing the search and rescue around that neighborhood, there were a lot of residents that wanted nothing to do with it. Like, they would kind of stand out on their property, like scowling at us and basically making it very uncomfortable to be there.
Right.
And this woman who lived at the property where the shallow grave was, she is a lawyer down in Los Angeles, but she also does cam girl. Like, she does like online porn.
Okay.
And then one day we went up there, and it looked like someone was trying to blackmail her because all over the road were these flyers, and it had a nude picture of her on there. And basically, I'll show this is the woman's house where the shallow grave was found. So it basically says, Attorney Bonnie, your neighbor, as seen on an adult personal's website. So
how does that have anything to do? Why would they?
So this is a theory that we have. So there's a ranch in Montanito that supposedly belongs to the Mexican cartel, and supposedly the marijuana groves that Mitrice's body was found belonged to that Mexican cartel.
Okay.
And supposedly this Bonnie is kind of like in cahoots with them, and maybe she's like represented some of them before, but we believe that she has some sort of relationship with the Mexican cartel.
Okay.
Which we also believe that the Lost Hills Sheriff or the LAPD is aware of what goes on up there, but they're kind of being paid hush money.
Yeah.
The theory that we have was that the Lost Hills County Sheriff, they released her in the middle of the night. She walked down this road, got lost in Montanito, and then somehow ended up maybe walking around the ranch where the supposed Mexican cartel is.
Okay.
And they took her because they didn't know what she was doing. Like, why is she snooping around? And then across the street from where this Bonnie Joe lives is a resident who we became really good friends with, but she likes to keep anonymity.
Okay.
So I guess I could just call her Susan. So Susan was the one who told the sheriffs about the shallow grave. She's like, hey, I heard the night Mitrice went missing, she heard screams.
Okay. Oh, so she was the one that reported the screams to the sheriffs? Okay.
Yeah. So she reported the screams in the middle of the night. She said, I heard a very short burst woman scream, and then I heard another scream that was quickly muffled.
Okay.
So she was the one that called in those screams, and then she called the family, like she got in touch with the family, who then put her in touch with Chip Croft, who was the producer of the documentary Lost Compassion.
Okay.
So he's the one that has been documenting this whole thing, this whole ordeal.
Uh-huh.
So he comes out with his video camera, and he videotapes the shallow grave, and then he goes up and starts videotaping the culvert, because she's like, this culvert was all of a sudden painted the next day in this peach color. Like, why would you just paint a metal culvert?
Right.
Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would you paint that?
Wasn't it just on essentially where they would have dragged, there would be...
Exactly.
Okay. So it wasn't like the whole thing.
No, it was just painted kind of like on the outer edge and then partially inside the metal tube of the culvert.
Okay.
So, everyone's like, why would they do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So when we actually went to the official search party, the route that we were assigned to search is this road called Stunt Road. And basically it's this really windy road that goes down the mountain into Montanito.
Okay.
And basically what we did was they gave us this orange tape, and we had a couple other people with us, and we slowly just walked down this road, stopped, looked over the edge just to see if we can see anything. And then if we saw something that may have looked suspicious, we would just tie some orange tape on like a nearby bush or a tree, so that way whoever was going to come back through and look could see where we were indicating that there was something there. So as we're going down Stunt Road towards like the end of the day, my mom was in her car kind of following me down the road, and I stopped because there was like a wire mesh gate and then concrete, and so I looked over the edge and I saw the mural that they found.
Uh-huh.
And so, that we found. So like, I was like, what is this? And it was just so random.
It's
like
very bizarre.
Where the location of it was, like completely hidden from the view of the road. The only reason we found it is because we were walking down the road.
Yeah.
And I go down there and I was like, oh my God. I mean, it was like, it wasn't a coincidence that was there. Like, I know that has something to do with her. Like,
Yeah.
It's just, why would someone just paint that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you paint derogatory images of African American women?
Yeah.
Like, it just, and like the fact that, Mitrice had Afro style hair that was reflecting in the mural.
Yeah.
And so we started taking pictures of it, and we called Chip, and then he called the family up, and then everyone was up there looking at it. And then within a few days later, the city had painted over it.
Right.
The sheriffs wanted nothing to do with it. They're like, oh, cool, a mural. And then, like, basically just disregarded it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I read that they asked somebody, they found out who did it, they said, and they asked them if they had anything to do with Mitrice, and they said no, and that was pretty much, like, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, interesting.
Yeah. And we searched an area, so basically, like, where Stunt Road, as it winds around, it basically, when you look over the edge, it looks on a dark canyon where her body was found, and how... basically, like, it was so hard to get to her remains that they had to be, like, airlifted in. And so our theory was that someone may have pushed her over the edge, just dumped her body over the edge of the road, and it in Dark Canyon.
Yeah.
And then also another really interesting thing that I thought about the other day was when all this was going on, my mom was pulling up, like, news articles about everything. And you know how people can leave comments on news articles. Well, someone left a comment that said, look up Kara Knott. And so my mom Googled Kara Knott, and she was a woman that got pulled over by a cop down in Orange County, and the cop raped her and killed her and threw her over the freeway overpass.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and someone just randomly wrote that, look up Kara Knott. And
yeah,
that kind of got us thinking, like, this could very well be a cover-up by the sheriffs, because when the family finally got the footage of Mitrice walking out of the police station, they said, like, a minute later, a deputy was following her.
Yeah, there was. When we were researching, we found so much information about the sheriff's department and just the different issues with corruption and, like, I mean, it was insane, all of the stuff that I was reading about them. So while I don't want to just completely implicate the sheriff's department, at the same time, they do seem sketchy, and the way they handled it was absolutely insane.
I mean, it was just such... The title of that documentary, Lost Compassion, was just such a fitting term for this whole ordeal, because they really just did not care. And for them to just not care kind of makes you think that, they're trying to push this under the rug.
Yeah.
And, the family was just so, like, they were like, no, like, we're not going to just let this go. Like, she's missing.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you guys doing... And then, like, they were so pushing the fact that, oh, she's in Vegas, she's a prostitute in Vegas now, like, there's been so many sightings of her, we should not be focusing all our resources here anymore because she just did not want to be found.
Right.
And it's what?
The cop said that, like, this girl doesn't want to be found, y'all are making her out to be, like, some criminal, and she's in a better place now.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Did you ever have any interactions with the sheriff's department while y'all were doing any searches or anything? Like, did you ever talk to anybody or?
So one part of the story that I was going to tell you guys, so after the organized searches that my mom and I did, we ended up going back there on our own, just my mom and I, and we basically did the same thing where we went down Stunt Road because there was just something like gravitating us there, like that's where we wanted to search. And we pulled off on the side of the road, and there was kind of like a flat area next to the road that had like some trees and shrubs, and so we walked down this path that we found, and as we're getting down the path, I look on the ground and I pick up a bone, and it was a rib bone. Like, it was clearly a rib bone, but I didn't know if it was from like a person or an animal, and so I put it back down, and as we keep walking, we find more bones. We find like vertebrae bones, and then at one point we found a pelvic bone. But then I couldn't tell if it was like a person or an animal, but you could tell those were distinct bones of a body. And so we didn't know if it was like from a mountain lion or like a coyote, or like, we didn't know. So we got really freaked out because we're like, this is just, I've never seen bones just like chilling next to a trail before. Like, I have sometimes in the foothills, like I've seen random stuff. So my mom she's like, we need to call this in. So she calls the sheriff. Sure enough, the Lost Hills sheriff pulls up, and it's a woman. And we called Chip, and Chip came with his camera and started documenting everything. So we came down, we showed her where the bones were, and then we just kind of kept walking around, and she doesn't call anything in. She doesn't call like a coroner. She doesn't do anything. All she does is go to her car, picks up a plastic bag, and just starts putting the bones in the bag.
Oh.
And Chip is documenting all of this. Like, she never called the coroner, and she even said herself, she's like, I don't know if these are human or not. Well, if you don't know, why would you just disturb them and just pick them up and put them in a plastic bag?
Yeah.
So we have pictures of these bones in a bag chilling on top of the hood of her car. And she took them away, and she said she was going to take them down to the station, and maybe they would get sent to the coroner. And so my mom followed up on it, and they never got sent to the coroner.
Oh, I wonder what she did with them.
Exactly. I mean, we weren't forensic pathologists. Like, we didn't know if those were human bones or not, and neither did she.
Right.
My mom found out, but they never ended up sending them in to see if they were actual human bones.
I'm not real surprised to hear that.
That was the only interaction I had with the sheriffs, and then there was another point I was going to bring up. So where Montanito is, like I said, like basically where the distance it is from those marijuana groves, they were also harvesting bees in the neighborhood. Like, you could see the white boxes stacked everywhere. And we had a theory that they were harvesting marijuana and putting them in these bee boxes in order to transport them out of there, because Susan said that she saw people dressed in beekeeper outfits at, like, basically at nighttime. And at nighttime, bees aren't out. Like, they're not active.
Yeah.
But these people are walking around in beekeeper outfits at night.
Okay.
We had a theory that maybe they were transporting marijuana through the bee boxes and then taking them out wherever. Because she said they were being moved around a lot. Like, they would be stacked on a pallet, and then this pallet would, like, be moved in different areas throughout this one property. And then I also had a theory that maybe at one point there were bees inside the boxes and that they buried a body underneath the boxes, and then by having the bees in there, it would keep people away from that area.
Yeah.
If you look at the mural in the top left-hand corner, it says "nice box." So it could be referring to a woman's vagina, or it could be referring to those boxes, because it's just a random white box in the corner of the mural.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah.
Well, that's a coincidence, too.
Mm-hmm.
So when that culvert was painted, was that what, like, in the timeline of events, was that months before her remains were discovered, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
When the culvert was painted, it was within, like, the month she disappeared.
Okay. So yeah, so that makes, so the body could technically still be kind of
in the area,
decomposing, and yeah, okay.
Yeah, when the remains were discovered, it was mainly like the bones and like her clothing, but her arm, it appeared as though it had mummified, and it was just her arm. Mm-hmm. This could have been like caused by maybe she got stuffed in a freezer, or like she was buried for a little bit, but because it was just her arm that was mummified.
Yeah.
Her body could have been moved like several times, so it could have been in that corral on that woman's property. It could have been then stuffed in that culvert as like a temporary place to hold the body, and then, I mean, it could have been, like, the way this area is, like, laid out, there's just sprawling ranches everywhere, and, like, all this property, and, like, so many different possibilities to bury a body. I was going to show Cheyenne kind of, this is where Susan lives, or lived. She ended up selling her house, but this is where she lived. That's where that Bonnie lady lived, where the lawyer lived, and so when you go around this turn, this is all her backyard right here. And then when you go on this road, this is where the shallow grave was. And then after she saw us kind of snooping around, she ended up building this huge wooden fence around her whole entire property.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we were walking around the road, like, we weren't trespassing, but we were definitely looking at her property and, like, taking pictures. And
so technically it was Bonnie's property that this shallow grave was on, but Susan saw the shallow grave. Okay.
Yeah. So Susan knew that Mitrice was missing. She heard the screams, and then she was out walking her dog, and then she just kind of randomly looked and saw the grave. And she's like, you know, she said it looked very suspicious, and so that's when she called it in. And then we came out a little bit later and saw it, and then, but that Bonnie lady she wasn't too happy that people were looking at her stuff, and so she built this huge wall around her whole entire property, and then a few weeks later is when those flyers were out on the street, like, everywhere. The ones with her naked. And, and I mean, I didn't even know what to think about it, but, like, we kept one of the flyers because we were like, this is kind of crazy. And so my mom...
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to think that possibly they were trying to just keep her to shut up, I guess, is what y'all are assuming is probably the reason why the flyers were up.
Yeah, but I mean, Susan's lived there for years, and she said she's always known that there's some strange characters living in that community, and, you know, they didn't want anything to do with the search. Like, there were some neighbors that came out and helped, but the majority of the neighbors didn't want to have anything to do with it, and she thought that maybe the cartel or whoever was involved was kind of keeping a surveillance on everyone.
Yeah.
And maybe threatening people.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it just, as spread out as a community is, it's still very small and, like, kind of tight-knit. Like, you're kind of in very close quarters with other people. And so she thinks that they probably were keeping everything on lock and, like, not wanting people to expose any sensitive details.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And from what I've read, the sheriff's department has dealings with them. They were under investigation from their own department, internal affairs, that they were fraternizing with the cartel and warning them about things and all sorts of stuff. So that totally could definitely make some actual sense there in that situation.
It's just like where her remains were found, no one would think to go up there. But the thing is, someone was planting marijuana up there.
Yeah.
And so knew about that location and knew that if they were to kill someone, this would be the perfect place to hide a body, is up here.
Yeah.
I was telling Shai we didn't want to talk about it for a really long time, like openly, because with my mom, being like a ex-volunteer for the sheriff's department, we didn't want to stir up anything and, like, have like a target on our back.
Right.
And
yeah.
It's like, with everything that's been exposed with the sheriff's department and how openly people talk about the corruption, we felt as though, like, now is a good time to talk about it. We don't really feel like we're going to be threatened or anything.
Yeah. Well,
it was very scary. Like,
I'm sure.
And Susan, she ended up having to sell her house because she was so paranoid about what was going on, and so she ended up leaving that area and moved into LA. And yeah, I mean, she basically felt as though she was, like, forced out of that area.
Jeez, just because of this, well, not just because, but because of this whole, and her talking, I guess, or
with her talking especially, like, she wanted to expose what was going on, but at the same time, like, she was putting her life at risk.
Yeah. Well, it's extremely interesting and terrible.
I know.
It's terrifying.
And then Stunt Road is known for, like, cars racing down. Like, it's very kind of like a drag strip.
That makes me wonder, because you're talking about how you guys thought that perhaps she was dumped, because how her leg was separated from her body, and I'm wondering if she was already decomposing and had been kept somewhere else, and then they dumped her. Maybe they were holding onto her leg or something, because it was just pulled clean out. Like, they tried to say an animal did it, but there were no animal marks on her body, so that could possibly make sense, because I've been wondering, how did her leg end up uphill from her body, completely separated, and then how did somebody get down there with her body to begin with? I don't think they could have done it if she was, I mean, as gross as it sounds, a fresh dead body. It would be really difficult to carry, even at 125 pounds, it would be really difficult to carry that down there, I would think.
Yeah, and then I think Chip talked to someone who had experience, and then Amber Dubois, she was another missing woman, and her father was featured in the documentary, and we met him, and he was saying that when his daughter's her remains were found, they were scattered everywhere because they were in different animal dens. And, I mean, this area in Montanito is known to have coyotes, mountain lions, bobcats, like, you name it. If her body is going to be way up there, it would have been in, like, a million different directions. The fact that they found it all in one area was very shocking. Like, it had literally just been placed there.
Yeah.
And then, wow, we found a body. Like,
I know. It makes me almost wonder, so what I read was that the park rangers were the ones that were going out to look to see if that marijuana operation had begun again since they destroyed it or whatever a year prior. And then, so they're the ones that found it. So it almost makes me wonder, did they, I am just speculating. That's what I continuously do about this case. Were they did somebody know that they were going to go out there and do a search for this marijuana grow operation and think, okay, here's the time for us to get rid of this body and have it be discovered? It just seems like, what a coincidence, because it was not even remotely, The
whole thing was like an inside job.
Yeah.
Like, everyone was kind of in cahoots with everyone, and maybe, people were getting paid off. We felt like the police and the killer or killers were all basically behind it. Like they were all together in this. And
the more I talk about it, the less I think that this was not done by, in some part, by the sheriff's department themselves,
It's just so hard to wrap your mind around that these are professionals or supposedly professional people. And I mean, it was just such a negligence and just so irresponsible. And I mean, that is not how you process a crime scene.
No.
They're like, oh, we found bones, let's just bag them up and then bounce. Like, it just, there was nothing. They didn't do anything.
No. It's totally illegal to do it that way, too. It's just so, I mean, according to the California Penal Codes, they're supposed to notify the coroner immediately, and do all this stuff. And they were just like, oh, shoot, it's going to be dark. We better just get her out of here. No picture. They didn't even take pictures or anything. Like, the only people that did was the park rangers. Like, I just cannot.
It was the same thing when my mom and I found those bones.
Yeah.
The same thing. Like, they just took them away, and then that was it. I mean, her mother, Mitrice, it's just so amazing how resilient she was throughout the whole thing. Like, she kept her composure, and, clearly you could see on her face how frustrated and how done she was with the sheriff's department, but she still held her head up high. And, like, even when we went to the funeral, she just spoke about Mitrice and, just was just so gracious about the whole thing. And, she had a very good support system, like with her sister and then Dr. Rhonda Hampton, who Mitrice was interning for. Mm-hmm. And, it was just so devastating to have her go through all of this, and, like, knowing that her daughter died under suspicious circumstances, but they're still ruling it an accidental death.
Yeah.
Or, that she wandered up there.
Right.
Like, really?
Yeah.
She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and she wandered up the canyon.
Yeah.
Like, the cops couldn't even get up there in, like, full suits. Like, they had to be dropped down by a helicopter. And it's just, I can't even imagine what she goes through.
No.
She just wants to find out what happened to her daughter, and then she just gets all these doors slammed in her face.
Oh, yeah. And they lied to her. I mean, they lied to her so much. They're just so disrespectful all around. It's totally astounding.
As much as, like, time we dedicated to searching for, a body, we always still held out hope that, maybe she's being held up in a trailer somewhere. Like, maybe someone still has her. Like,
mm-hmm.
You still wanted to kind of hope for the best, but expect the worst. And, when they finally found her remains, like, it was devastating because, like, obviously we never met her, we didn't know her, but, like, we kind of grew to know her, and, like, we got to know her family, and it's like, it's almost as if you, like, knew her, like, when she was alive, and then, like, when you find out that they found her remains, like, it was devastating. Like, it was awful. And and then they ended up exhuming her body again just to say that...
Yeah, to do their own inside second autopsy. And, like, the sheriff lied and said that he did talk to the FBI and they were going to get involved and all this, and he was going to put up a reward on that county site, and then he just totally made the whole thing up to Latrice. I can barely talk. I'm just so flustered.
I know. I mean, like, it gets me worked up because it's like the poor woman, like, it's that all signs point to her being murdered and like being in a huge cover up, but yet there's no justice for her.
Right.
Like, and,
Sorry, that's what's so crazy though is like LAPD, forensic pathologists, forensic anthropologists, everybody, any expert you talk to says that immediately off the bat, the circumstances would be considered a homicide until that could be ruled out. And yet the LASD is like they're in their coroner's office, which I guess because they didn't have anything to go off of, they can't say determine it like yes or no what happened, but they're the only people that say, oh, this was an accident. Like it's just insane. If I were her mother, I don't know what I would even do. I don't even know how you...
Yeah, and her mother has exhausted all these resources and, like, has, gotten really powerful people to speak on her behalf, and it's still nothing. And when the documentary came out, he's dedicated his life to this and just exposing the truth. And he would show footage of a spokesperson for the sheriff's office and then pull up the court disposition contradicting what that person's saying.
We so much appreciate you talking to us, taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for talking to me. And
thank you.
Yeah.
And we're back. So
I don't know about you, but listening to Colleen talk, I got chills like a lot of times because it was just like, oh my gosh, like, can you imagine?
No.
So Colleen had mentioned the strange bee boxes, and going back to the mural, I thought it was weird. She pointed out that there was a box in the mural looking down at the African American women with big eyes, and someone had painted a nice box on it.
And it was a white box like the bee boxes that she described.
Yeah.
And like she said, the box could be used to describe, I mean, obviously it could be a pun. It could also have multiple meanings. It could be possibly representing one of the bee boxes that she was talking about that may have been set over the body where it was buried for some period of time. Because as we heard just now, that there was a shallow grave that a neighbor spotted on, like, everybody has got some land around here. And a neighbor spotted that shallow grave and reported it because Mitrice was still missing. And then that's when the culvert, like the next day or something, I mean, obviously we just played the call, but now I've already forgotten it. But either way, and then following her reporting that, the culvert was painted that kind of pinkish color that first of all would be a color that you could use to cover up some sort of bloody trail. The same neighbor, as you just heard, was the person who reported the screams to the police that we spoke about last episode. So so this same lady who reported the screams, and the Smith, the old newscaster who reported Mitrice being in his yard. Last episode, we talked about how somebody in his neighborhood had reported a woman screaming in the night following Mitrice's disappearance, I believe. And here it was, this woman who spotted this shallow grave also, and then saw that there was the culvert that was painted pink. It's kind of crazy.
Strange thing about the scream too is, I don't know if it was her or someone else had reenacted the scream that was heard, and it was confirmed that it is the type of scream that is consistent with someone having their throat damage to the throat area.
Yeah.
Which is creepy.
That is, kind of a crazy coincidence and like kind of strange circumstances that may not be related, but seems awfully suspicious.
When she had mentioned that they were walking down the road and had found like a rib bone, a pelvic bone, vertebrae. Yeah. It's confusing to me as to why the sheriff's department came, collected the evidence, and then the follow-up was done on these bones, and nothing was ever reported to the coroner or someone that could investigate whether these were human or not.
Which, it seems like that runs in the sheriff's department, that they don't take care of these situations. Obviously, it's possible she thought they were just animal remains and wasn't taking it seriously. But, I don't know that she can necessarily determine that.
Well, she stated herself, I'm not a pathologist. I don't know.
Yeah, so let's try to just rule everything in before you rule anything out. So the way this road is set up that they were on, obviously she said Dark Canyon was just below it, and they started to think that perhaps, and it was also near this mural, and they were starting to think that maybe Mitrice was dumped over the side of this canyon. It seems to me that does make a lot of sense considering the way that her remains were found, as far as we were told. So to me, they need to have searched all along, which obviously would not be easy, but all along that hillside, in some decent radius around there, and they probably could have found some more evidence, maybe more clothing of Mitrice's or something, who knows. But as it stands, they just didn't really seem to care to look too far into what was going on. Now, I know on the call she also mentioned that the lady that was the attorney was supposedly kind of worked in cahoots with the cartel that was in the area, supposedly, who we'd also heard that the sheriff's department was in cahoots with. And, who knows? But, like, obviously this is just speculation here. But if that's a big theory that circulates about Mitrice's case, is that some marijuana farmers killed her for wandering onto their property. This lady's working with marijuana farmers cartel. I don't know, cartel marijuana farmers. I don't know who's who there, but she's supposedly working with the cartel. The sheriff's department supposedly does some dealings with the cartel, fraternizes with them. Around this time, if you recall last episode, we talked about they were under investigation in their own investigation from Internal Affairs. Around this time period, they were being investigated for and actually had fraternized with the cartel. They had given them information about investigations. They had
carried out certain tasks.
So that's possible. Although at that Dark Canyon spot, exactly where she was found, there was a grow operation that was like right within a few yards of where she was. That was the one that they had destroyed a year prior. So I'm thinking that one probably isn't the one, because they had destroyed it and they did not find any evidence that it had been restarted. But in this little neighborhood where if her body had been dumped, it would seem like that's a very convenient location for it to have been coming from.
Convenient. Yeah. It was like so weird to me to think that, well, how convenient that they send out these park rangers on this day to go look for this stuff. And then, oh, hey, a body.
Right.
Like,
I don't think we are implicating in any way the park rangers.
No.
But did someone give them a tip?
Yeah.
Or did somebody who knew that they were going to be going out there looking to see if that grow operation had been restarted? Was it determined that we need to go dump the body here, but they're going to be over in this area and then they'll find her and, at least the body for whatever reason.
Who's going to go look down there on any other given day?
I really, really do think that it was dumped there.
Yeah.
And it seems incredibly coincidental that it happened to be so close to the time that these park rangers were going out to look at this old grow operation. So who freaking knows? So that's really, as far as it stands, that's it for the information on the Mitrice Richardson murder. I will say that.
Yep.
The cities of Calabasas, Agora Hills, and Malibu, California are all offering a combined reward of $30,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible in the death of Mitrice Richardson. And I'm just going to say it. If you have any information whatsoever, any tips that you might be able to help find or arrest the person and convict the person who may have anything to do with Mitrice's murder. I know there are some people out there. I know you're out there. You may not be listening to this podcast, but maybe one day you will. And let's give information to Crime Stoppers and go from there. So if you have any information regarding what happened to Mitrice Richardson on the night of August 9th, 2010, or in the days following that night, you can call Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS. That TIPS, that's 8477. So please, if you have any information, do it.
I highly recommend watching the documentary too, Lost Compassion. It's on Amazon Prime for free. It's really good. I cried like 4 times. And you can really get a feel and understanding about, how just loved and cared for this young lady was. And someone really does need to step up and come forward.
Right. And it's a travesty that we have law enforcement officials that treat people and victims, their families like this. And, all the people involved should be heckin' ashamed with themselves. And, I would never wish this on anyone. So how they've handled it, I don't know, but I commend them because they are continuing to fight for answers in regards to what happened to Mitrice. And I think we are going to as well. So if we're going to try to get even more information and continue with this story, but until something happens to get more answers.
I think we're going to have to do like a follow-up because we have some things in store. And
yeah, we do. We got some scoops. So anyway, we appreciate everybody for tuning in to this one. This is going to be a pretty lengthy episode for us. This might be longer than John Bonet. So we appreciate it. We have really had great responses this week.
Yeah. Right now, the best thing you can do and the biggest thing that we can appreciate is just word of mouth and sharing the podcast. Even if it's just an Instagram story, shout out, Facebook status, whatever. We want more people to be aware of the podcast.
Right. Share. We would just love the heck out of you if you could. We're putting together some ways that we can be more interactive and hopefully get ourselves out there to even more people that we'll be sharing with you in the next few weeks. And as it stands, I think we are calling it for today. So
yes,
have a good
rest of your week.
Right? That's Shy's little line. I didn't want to steal it. Okay. Keep it real, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.